Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another session of the podcast series of Artha Point. Today we have with us Dr. Jitendra Bhandari. He is an academician and a keen researcher. Sir has completed both his post graduation and PhD in economics. Dr. Bhandari has more than 17 years of rich experience in teaching and research. We welcome you to the podcast series, sir.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, sir. Sir is currently an associate professor at Christ University, and it is we are obliged that sir has asked us to come at the Christ University and have a session with him. We have an important topic of discussion today: the prospect of World Economy 2023. The world economy is in doldrums with weak economic growth, stubborn inflation, and rising interest rate in the major developed economies clouding the near-term economic outlook. Legacy effects of COVID-19 pandemic, the protracted war in Ukraine, the effects of climate change are all affecting the world economy. So today, let us go ahead and discuss what would be the prospect of world economy in the second half of 2023. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, talking about world economy, I think let me take you back a little bit in past. When Francis Fukuyama gave his very famous thesis, The End of History, what he was talking about, as per his thesis, the end of history, that probably that the world has found kind of a solution for every problem, be it economic problem or a political problem. For example, economic problem, it is established that the capitalist system is the best possible system. Through capitalist system, through market mechanism, we can solve almost all the economic problems: poverty, unemployment, etc., economic growth. And the democracy and free speech will give us a stable economic political government where everybody will be treated equally. So in a way that we have found some kind of a golden nectar, and that is why now no more discussion about economics and politics. But alas, he was proved wrong, and came the 2008, 7 and 8 economic crisis. So I want to take you back towards that crisis first, because if you go back into the history a little bit back, then 2006, 4, 5, 3, 2, it was considered the golden age of economics. Everybody was racing ahead, including India. We have seen our best economic growth rates in that era, 2002, 2007. But then, of course, we all know 2008 crisis hit us, and all of us hit hard. And then we realized probably both the end of history was wrong. We found some cracks in the economic theory. We found some cracks in the democratic system. We found some crack in the globalization, where everybody was approved of process of globalization. But then we realized that there are cracks everywhere. And then started the rebuilding of world economy, global economy. Of course, the impact was more on America, USA, so they were doing a lot of things there. But then slowly and gradually they were building up the economy. But as I said, the cracks were visible. There are a lot of changes in the political thinking, economic thinking, including the talk of deglobalization, right, and reduction in international trade, nationalism and all. That started coming to the picture, including the mother of capitalism, if I may use the expression, in the United States of America. But then slowly and gradually we were building up. Then came the a very unique crisis. We all know the pandemic. In fact, there is a famous Chinese saying, which is, "May you live in interesting time." And unfortunately, I think we all of us are living in very interesting time. The pandemic came, nobody knows what is going on, what is this disease, how to resolve the problem. It started with health crisis, which gradually, immediately rather I would say, converted into economic crisis. And for almost 2 years, the whole world was in in very dire situation, both in terms of health, in terms of politics, and of course in terms of economics. And for example, country like India, we have seen first time in the history of our economic history post independence a negative economic growth rate, which was true for many other economies, including the developed economies. So we were coming out of that shock. Most of us, especially India, we were doing well, but then came the next shock, which was Russia-Ukraine war. So now if we see all these things together, so probably things are very, very haphazard. And then you talked about the inflation bout, and which was true for economy like USA, which has witnessed spike in inflation in the 40 years of their history. First time they have seen this kind of inflation, which probably a generation don't even know how to react with this kind of inflation. But from a developing economy point of view, yes, we know what is inflation, how to behave in inflation scenario. But for an average American, they were not even knowing what is this inflation is all about. And as per some theories, the immediate cause of inflation was that because at the time of pandemic, US government spent billions of dollars, including the direct cash transfers, whether you need it or not. American government has distributed a lot of cash to everyone. And when things improved, so a lot of cash came back to market, spike in demand, supply was not that much, and accordingly we have the typical economic theory played out, rise in price level and inflation rate. So but I think the explanation is not that simple. I was listening to Mr. Powell, the Fed chairman, and according to his he put it very interestingly that whatever I was knowing about inflation, now I feel that as if I don't know anything about inflation. So a lot of debate is going on. What are the sources of this inflation? What are the causes of this inflation? And what are the possible solution of this inflation? Including the great debate between Paul Krugman and Larry Summers, Oliver Blanchard. Everybody is guessing. And then the spillover effect was all over the world. So I must say, and somehow, if I may say, contrary to many expectations, somehow India is so far insulated. We are doing relatively well compared to the rest of the world economy, where the economic growth rate has come down to 2 to 3% on an average, whereas as the IMF put it, we are one of the bright spot in the world economy. Here I must bring China factor also. So China, if we see, we all know the kind of growth China has witnessed, and because of Chinese economic growth rate, probably the world economic growth rate. But post-COVID, and because of the restricted lockdown policies and all, we know that Chinese economy is struggling. The latest numbers, especially in the property market, which was backbone for their economy, is again not very encouraging. I think the major company, I'm forgetting the name of the company, it has shown very poor results in the recent quarter. So China is slowing down. They don't have the problem of inflation per se, but they are slowing down considerably. And then there is a lot of geopolitical tension around China, West China, South China Sea, and of course India, China, and then Chinese-Vietnam issue, China-Taiwan issue. So if we see politically, the world is not stable. A war is going on between two important countries. America is still struggling with inflation. China has slowed down, and by some analysis, which is a very interesting analysis, if you want, we can discuss that aspect also, that according to some accounts, some intellectuals, that they are doing it deliberately. Somehow they think that China don't want this kind of economic growth anymore. For them, it is politics, the political environment, which is more important than their economic environment right now. So they are more focusing on politics or domestic political economy rather than economics. So yeah, I must say, on and all, things are not very encouraging. My bet is on two things. One, of course, Russia-Ukraine war. Sooner it finishes, better for all of us. And the inflation issue in especially in America, United States of America.
So it comes, from what you said, sir, there are a lot of questions that I have. The first one is, you said that India is comparatively in a better place, and the budget and survey that India published this year, and in fact even the last year, mentioned that India is going through a V-shaped recovery, and India was one of the early players to go back and recover itself. But still we see that inflation is increasing in India. We see that the repo rates are high, the interest rates are increasing. So why would we say that India, I mean, if inflation is increasing in India, why would we say that India is recovering, but the world economy, the other parts of the world which face inflation are not that better off, but India is still at a better place?
I think it's a good question. Then I would say that we have to look at some other indicators as well, not only inflation. And even with inflation, if we see the latest number talks about around 7%, something like that. So 7% is not a historical high for us. Under the previous regime, I'm not talking in terms of politics, just as a reference point, 2004 to 2014, the average inflation was around 6-7%, and for some time it was in double digits. So we have seen this kind of inflation. And in any case, if you see the RBI mandate, the inflation target is 4 to 6%. So from upper band, it is around 1% more. So that is why I'm saying it's not extraordinarily high. Yes, it is high, especially for specific commodities. Yes, it is high. But if we see other number, the fiscal deficit of Government of India, if we see the revenue deficit of Government of India, if we see the public debt or debt growth over a period of time for Government of India, and of course if you see the economic growth rate for India, and I think the foreign exchange reserve, almost all indicators tells us that India is relatively in safe situation. So that is why I'm saying probably that compared to many other countries, our situation is better, especially compared to developed countries.
Got it. So the next thing that I have is, so as we mentioned that China is one country which has not been able to recover much, and there has been a lot of news these days that it might even or it has already entered into recession. But it's not only with China. We see that many other countries also, we keep getting news that one or the other country is entering into recession. So there is still a lot of uncertainty associated, even though it's been quite a time that the COVID scenario that the countries were in, that has been over. So why is it that uncertainty still lies in the world, and what can be done to remove that uncertainty and to get countries on the path of progress?
Again, a great question. So as I said, I think what is happening, in order to understand this current phenomena, unfortunately we have to go back to the past, which I have already mentioned in my opening remark, that if you see the post global financial crisis era, we already started having a talk of deglobalization, right? International trade is not good, and this talk, or this voices rather, I would say, was coming from not from developing countries. In fact, the voices were coming from developed nations, exactly the same nations who were benefited out of globalization or out of international trade, especially countries like US and UK. But UK accepted the Brexit, right, coming out of EU, whereas in US we know Donald Trump became the president of United States of America on the slogan of Make America Great Again, essentially meaning that we will focus more on American domestic economy rather than international economy. And then the COVID, then the China. So if we see, this kind of storm was brewing last 15-20 years. And what we are observing right now, this is the outcome of those events. And as I said, probably the trust has gone down considerably among the countries. In fact, the famous allies, US and EU, they are also having some confrontational kind of conversation. with respect to some particular issues, especially with respect to Russia-Ukraine war. And so, taken these things together, I think, as per my understanding of world economy, I think the most important thing what we are facing right now is the trust issue. And I think this trust issue can be resolved only when the Russia-Ukraine war will get over. Because till the time there is a Russia-Ukraine war, there are a lot of kind of diplomatic issues are going on between various countries, and they are not been able to settle it down. Because Russia plays an important part as far as energy is concerned, and Ukraine plays an important part as far as food grains are concerned, and both of them are in Europe. So if something is happening in Europe, it affects the whole Europe. And because Europe is so close to United States of America, it affects United States of America also. So to my mind, the immediate relief, if you really want a deep relief, big relief, I think it has to come from the Russia-Ukraine war. That is the end of Russia-Ukraine war. And then we want some kind of political, geopolitical stability, especially in South China Sea. The problem is China has changed its trajectory. China is no longer looks to be very interested in economic growth. So for Chinese, for example, you must have heard that suddenly the CEO of Alibaba was invisible, right? Jack Ma was invisible. He was all over the print media, news media few years back. Now he is nowhere to be seen. I think few days back they have removed their foreign minister also, just like a blink of an eye, right? So the problem is that we are also dealing with a very different kind of China, if I may say. Till few years back, yes, the political system was same, but they were kind of following by and large the Western system, governance system, at least international governance system. But now the problem is China is behaving differently. So, and we all are trying to understand what exactly they want. So we have to decipher the mystery behind Chinese mindset, and of course the Russia-Ukraine war. For me, these are the two major roadblocks. If we are able to solve these two issues, I think we can come back to normal trajectory of economic growth. Yes, the elephant in the room, that is climate change, is still there.
Right.
Yeah.
Just one last question I have, sir. So, do you think that among these uncertainties and other things that are going on around the world, India can actually be better off, take a powerful position and grow above the other economies?
Oh yes, I think as they say, the term is China plus one policy. I think it is time for us to really claim our space in the world. Literally, we are going to moon, and otherwise also I'm saying. I think it's the right time. But for that, our economy, our political system have to be really agile in order to capture the space which is created by now, because China is retracting. So somebody has to fill that space. Of course, India alone cannot fill. It's a huge shoe to fill, but we can be there. We are there, but unfortunately, to my liking, the activeness is not exactly there. Yes, we are doing tits and bits here and there, but not exactly like if I may give you the example of Vietnam. They are very active. They are a small economy compared to us, but still they are really active. They are able to attract more foreign companies coming out from China to Vietnam. Whereas somehow we have slight bit of confusion with respect to Atmanirbhar Bharat, right? So what exactly that convey? Are we welcoming the foreign capital, or are we pushing the domestic capital? That is somewhere there is a confusion in the policy. It may be true that government may be absolutely clear, but unfortunately the clarity of government is not percolating to the business world. So I think it is the right time for India because our fundamentals are good. And one factor I must say, which probably the opposition parties will not like, but the stable government is an important input for any economic policy. So luckily we have 10 years of stable economic political governance, and maybe for next 5 years also we will have a continuation of economic governance, political governance. So it's an important ingredient. The only thing probably we need a proper comprehensive economic plan where we can capture the space which is now left behind because of China retraction, and utilize this golden opportunity to genuinely become a 5 trillion economy, and
Exactly.
of course, more importantly, uh, equality of wealth and all, right? Distribution of wealth, if I may say. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for your time, sir. I think so. It was a very insightful session, and the points that you have added would be very, very beneficial for any student who is studying economics. We always, tell students to think out of the box and not just be too bookish. And you have gone ahead and given them one important point to think about as to how the world economy will be, not only in this year but even in the coming year. Thank you for your time, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming into Christ University. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir.